My name's Lee Ann Marie.
And I'm Lee Marie.
And we are Lee plus Lee
Equals Fun Factory.
Should we say Fun Factory together?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
You can visit our YouTube channel and Instagram page at Lee plus Lee equals Fun Factory. With a little @ sign.
Yeah.
Collectively, between our social media platforms, we have about 5.7,827,421 followers. Yesterday, we boosted about 5.
Shoot everything that we do throughout the course of a day,
Even if we don't have to do it.
just so we make sure that we can post enough to keep people's interest.
Yes, because engagement is very, very important in the social media world.
Yeah.
How many hours a day do we spend on Instagram?
Oh gosh, like 13, 14?
Yeah, I would say that. What about Facebook?
Oh, that's like another 10.
Yeah, it's for like 23 hours at least collectively. Yeah. And what about Twitter? What is that? Do people even use Twitter anymore?
I don't know.
I don't think so. How many followers did we gain last week on our Instagram channel?
I thought that was your job.
Okay, 420,000.
Okay.
But that's only because we posted about the banana and the ice cream.
What did we call it? Sunday Split.
Sunday splits, that's right.
Yeah. That was good. That was a good one.
That was a good one. I thought of that one.
And then you forgot.
And then I forgot. And then she remembered, so we did it.
My routine.
Team Lee plus Lee equals.
Fun Factory.
Well, thanks to Lee and Lee for bringing a little lightness to the beginning here. They're going to be joining us over the next couple weeks for the purpose of kind of pointing out how many things in our lives that we do radically. There's a lot of times, maybe social media is an example, right? Someone can spend their whole life doing silly things on social media in today's world and be considered a role model and a hero, but someone could spend almost all their time doing prayer and reading their Bible and doing all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden they're considered radical. You ever think about that? The average American today spends about 2 to 3 hours on social media each day, according to some studies. Yet, imagine how radical you might be in your friend group if you started to spend 2 to 3 hours a day reading your Bible and praying and kind of ministering in the midst of that time. It's amazing to us how we start to define things differently. Why is one considered radical and the other considered normal? Why is it okay to sacrifice? They say, I don't know if you heard them. This is, I think, 23 hours a day on social media that Lee and Lee were doing. But why is it okay to sacrifice almost all of your existence to social media or something like that, but then not okay to do something else, and that's considered radical? We've been talking over the past couple weeks as we start this. If you haven't been around, we're starting this series together. Every year we do a church-wide small group study leading up to Easter. This year we decided to do radical, and over the past several weeks as I've announced it, I've said, it would have been, with the year that we've had, it might have been easy for us to just do like a butterfly and rainbows and lollipops study, something that was really comfortable and nice and all that kind of stuff, and it felt good. And radical doesn't sound like it feels good. And yeah, I think there's going to be some tough questions we maybe have to ask of ourselves over the next couple weeks. But a lot of times when we get into the idea of what radical is, I think we have a harder look at it because of the way that the word radical is used. It's used as a word to divide and characterize people in a negative way. The word radical gets tossed around for all kinds of political purposes. And people use it as a derogatory term for people who you don't like or you want to fight against. And it might seem like a strange study to do, but I think if we could really understand what radical really means and become like that in this season, it's going to be the best thing we could do for our lives as we live in the midst of this crazy world we live in right now. To start, we have to just define what the word radical means to start out our study in the right direction, right? So the word radical, according to Merriam-Webster, is of or going to the root or origin, fundamental. So it's of or going to the root or the origin. It's fundamental to what it is. At the very core basis, being radical is just truly and fundamentally being what you call yourself to be. So I read a book a couple years ago called The Marvelous Pigness of the Pig by Joel Salatin, and it's a really great book. And Joel Salatin he's a farmer and like a pastor, and like he's all these things combined. He's a really great author. It's a silly title, The Marvelous Pigness of the Pig, but the purpose of it was his intention to try to get to the core of how God has created everything to truly live out its essence. You know, the pigness of the pig, the essence of why God created the pig, or the chickenness of the chicken, or the personness of the person, you know, the humanness of the human. God has created us to be who we are and to live in the midst of our fundamental essence of who we are. So when we consider the word radical, it's not about being an extremist. It's about being fundamentally what you call yourself to be. So the goal in this series, it's in your notes there, is to take us back to the fundamental aspects of Christianity and challenge us to consider whether our lives are built solidly on the foundation of Jesus or if it's built on other things. It's written by pastor and author David Platt, and he shares most of his experience as a pastor in the States and also doing missions around the world. And he uses Jesus' word. Most of the stuff you're going to be reading is just directly out of the Gospels, Jesus' words out of the Gospels, and an international flavor to help us explore what it really means to be a Christian. He's traveled all over the world, and he's seen Christianity all around the world. We intend it to be an immersive experience together, so however you feel like you can participate. But we have books out there that you can buy, try to make them as affordable as possible. We have small groups you can be a part of, 20-something small groups. There's some online for those of you online. There's some in person to be a part of as well. There's videos that we're going to study on Right Now Media, and you can go to ehwc.org/rightnowmedia to get signed up for that account and to be able to see those videos. And then we're going to have these sermons. So we're hoping at this time during this series that we can really get to the core of this and see what God has to say to us. Today we're going to start out with the first question, and maybe the most important question to start with. And it's specifically asking the question, what do we treasure? We're talking about radical sacrifice. You know, they could sacrifice 23 hours of their day for social media. If we're going to have radical sacrifice in our lives, it starts with asking ourselves the question, what do we treasure? Matthew 6:21 says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." If we're going to question our faith and whether it's radical or not, we have to see, is Jesus worth giving up everything for? And David Platt says this, plainly put, a relationship with Jesus requires total, superior, and exclusive devotion. So that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to do that by studying from Matthew 13, a little passage from there, and then seeing where God leads us in the midst of that. So if you want to turn your Bibles to Matthew chapter 13, there's a Bible in front of you if you don't have one. And I'm just going to pray as we read God's word. Father, we just pray for your wisdom today. We're all coming from different places and perspectives. Maybe we've been a Christian for a long time and we just need to hear a new word from you today. Maybe we're brand new to this thing. We're just checking it out online, or we're here in person and we've never really heard much about Jesus. God, I just pray that you speak to our hearts, each one of us. God, I offer myself to you. Speak to my heart. May we all be changed by hearing from you. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Matthew chapter 13, Jesus is talking about some parables to explain what the kingdom of heaven is like, what his kingdom is like, what it means to follow Jesus. And he says this in Matthew 13, verse 44. He says, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it." Very simple, very short, very straightforward parable that Jesus teaches about. But it teaches us a little bit about his perspective on what his kingdom is like. So let's learn some lessons about this, about what it means to treasure something. The first thing is this. The characteristic that makes something a treasure is its rarity and or its importance to us. What makes something a treasure is its rarity or its importance to us. If you see this parable, there's a treasure hidden in a field. And you might say, why is it hidden in a field? What's that even mean? Well, back then there weren't banks. You couldn't just go to the bank and put your valuable things into a bank and lock it safely away. And so when you had something valuable of great worth, you would take it, you put it in a clay pot, you dig a hole, you'd bury it in a field somewhere that only you knew about. And many people had these things at that time. That's where you buried your treasure. So imagine in the parable, a day laborer's out, he's working the fields, he's doing what he needs to do. Maybe the soil's been run away because of the rain coming through or the wind blowing it away, and he sees and discovers this pot in the ground, and he digs it across, he opens it up, and in that is something valuable, treasured, rare, that he looks at it and he says, this could be so valuable, it could change the entire existence of my life. He's not making much money, he's a day laborer, and he looks in here and this could change my life. Well, why was that valuable to him? Well, it's because it was rare, it was valuable, it had value to it. Same thing with the pearl example, merchant looking for a pearl. And even today, happy Valentine's Day, by the way, to anybody here that's married. But if you're buying that, say you're buying pearls for your wife. Well, even today, pearls are valuable. There's something that's rare to find, right? And so you have that. A merchant's looking for this pearl of significant price because they're rare and it's hard to find. You don't treasure everything you come in contact with. You don't walk up to everything. That'd be kind of weird, right? If you just walked around and everything you found is like, oh, this is the best thing ever, right? You don't just treasure everything. We treasure things because they're either rare, they're valuable, or they're both. Recently I was on social media. I was on Facebook, and like Lee and Lee, right? I was on Facebook, but I was looking through, and this video happened to come up of this guy, and I watched it a little bit. He was a lawyer, and he left behind the career of being a lawyer, really great income, doing really well, something that was making a difference. He left that behind to become a YouTube creator about Pokemon cards. Like, he went from being a lawyer to like a guy that does videos on Pokemon cards. And I was like, why would you do that? Like, why would you leave behind a steady career, making a decent amount of money as a lawyer to do Pokemon cards? And then he started to, as I listened to him and watched more videos of this, like, some of these Pokemon cards are so rare, I guess, and I guess they're valuable to somebody enough. You can sell some of them for like $100,000 for one card. $100,000. Some of them are $5,000, some of them are $10,000, $50,000. These cards, but why is it like that? Well, the things that make them most valuable, as this guy talks, is their rarity. If you can only find 1 or 10 out of all the millions of packs of cards that went out or whatever, it's the rarity of what it is. And also, people have to assign value. There's some of you in here that you're like, a Pokemon card, I pay like 6 cents for that. Like, or I wouldn't want to buy it anyways, right? But somebody has to value enough to make that something that's treasured to them. So whatever it is that we treasure in our life, we treasure it because we either believe it's rare or it's valuable in some way to us that other things aren't. Also, when we do treasure something, you don't hesitate to sacrifice for it. When we treasure something, you don't hesitate to sacrifice. If you read in this passage, it says after he finds the treasure, it says in his joy, then he went out and sold everything he had. In his joy. The merchant, it just says he went away and he sold everything he had and he bought it. But imagine this, like it says in his joy. There's no hesitation, there's no debating. It's like it's happy. He's happy to go and sacrifice everything he has in his life and set everything aside. When is the last time that you sacrificed something significant in your life with no hesitation? If you can answer that question, in that you'll probably find the thing you most treasure. And I know it's easy to put this in the context of just money, right? Sacrificing money, but you can sacrifice all kinds of stuff. When did you last sacrifice your time? When did you last sacrifice a relationship? When did you last sacrifice your thought life? When did you last sacrifice your physical well-being? If you did that, in that you'll probably find what you treasure because you're willing to sacrifice for what you treasure most. And the third lesson comes with that. If the treasure is valuable enough, it would not be out of the question to sacrifice everything you have for it. I mean, we just said that when you treasure something, you sacrifice. But the point being, I wanted to emphasize the point of these people in this parable did not just sacrifice some. They didn't just say like, yeah, this is really valuable. I'm going to go back and sell like this little part of what I have. They literally sacrificed everything. They sold everything they owned because the thing that they treasured was dear enough to them. It demonstrates that when something is valuable enough, when you consider it valuable enough, you are willing to give up everything that you possibly have for it. Now, if all these things are true, if what you treasure, the characteristic of a treasure is a rarity or valuable sense to you, and when you treasure something that you're willing to sacrifice potentially everything you own for it, here's the question that's been just like weighing on me as I've been preparing for this message. If this is all true, then why do we often act like used car salesmen when we're talking about Jesus with our friends and coworkers? If that's true, if what we treasure is something that we're willing to give up everything for, why do we act like used car salesmen? Let me explain what I'm talking about here. No offense to used car salesmen. We have different people that sell cars in here. I'm not offended, but a lot of people talk about used car salesmen in a different way than maybe somebody that works at a premium dealership where they're selling like these supercars that are just fancy and brand new and amazing. And what's the difference? There's really no difference between the two people. They're probably great salespeople. They probably use the same sales tactics for some extent of it, right? The only difference when you think about it is the difference between the car and the perception of the car's value. The difference is the perception of the car and its value. So for instance, they got some pictures here. There's one car, right? So say you're a used car salesman, you're trying to sell this car, right? You're looking at it and you're like, yeah, it's been around. Maybe it's got 250,000 miles on it. Like it's been around a while, but it's real stable. It's got some rust on it, but it's still holding together. We don't have to duct tape it yet. It wasn't an accident. We had to replace the front of it a little bit, but hey, but we're going to give you a great deal. Don't you worry. And you're not going to have to sacrifice too much for it. We're going to make sure it's really worth your time and your effort and this is really stable. A used car salesman has to work really hard to get somebody interested in that car, right? Because oh yeah, don't worry. We're going to make it easy for you. It's going to be really nice. Now we got the other car, premium supercar, right? You look at this car, and again, maybe you're not a car person. I totally get that. We're just using this as an example of something that's valuable. You look at this, and what do you think the salesman has to do for this one? They're not going to be like, I know, it's not really that great. No, you're like, just go sit in it. It's awesome. It's probably got crazy computers on the inside, and it probably drives itself or something, right? You don't have to convince somebody of the value of this car. What do you have to convince somebody about? For this example, I think it's a Bugatti. In this example, you do have to convince them. I think these are over $1 million, right? You have to convince them that the cost is worth what's there. So you think about the used car. The used car, it's like, oh, I'm sorry. I know it's really bad, but no, we're going to make it as cheap and easy and affordable as you can, right? And they try to sell past what the car is. For this, the supercar, it's just I don't have to, look at this thing. It's amazing. It's totally worth it. Yeah, it's going to cost you. But let me tell you what, it is the most amazing car you've ever sat in, and it's going to be the most amazing thing ever. What dawned on me this week is that so many of us, and myself included, we tend to talk about Jesus more like a used car salesman sometimes. I know it's hard. I know faith's hard. I know, it's hard to, come to church, and I get it. And I don't want to make this too uncomfortable for you. It's, we don't talk about politics and religion. I don't want to make it too. And really, it's really easy. Just step in a little bit. You don't have to come in. Just put. We start to talk like a used car salesman, and I wonder at the end of the day if part of the reason we do that actually has to do with the fact that we don't really, truly treasure Jesus ourselves. And if so, I think this makes perfect sense why some of us struggle to sacrifice parts of our life to Him. We went to, I think I told you that we went to visit my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law in Africa as they got married this fall, and we were over there. And sometimes when you travel around the world to other places, it gives some great perspective in the sense, you're going to a place where people don't have as much physically, money and prosperity and possessions and stuff like that. But the thing I find every time I go to a different part of the world that they might have less in some respects is there's a sense in which they're much more willing to sacrifice big areas and big chunks of our life than maybe some of us are here in the States. But they do it completely willingly, and it allows more room in them for this deep and abiding and joyous love for Jesus. That's different than I often find here with myself and with others. David Platt talks about this in this first chapter that, he did a lot of missions work and has done, traveled around the world visiting the church. And he went to a place in Asia where it's, you can't really host church. You get persecuted on everything. And he talked about how people had to walk there secretly because they could have been caught by the authorities. And then once they got there, they all huddled together in this little room. And it was dark and stuff. And then they're all just talking about how, yes, my church has been attacked by this cult. And they're trying to take people away. And another person got up and, some of my people got approached by the government and said, if you keep trying to study the Bible together, then we're going to take you to prison and we're going to do all kinds of stuff against you. And all this persecution's happening. And said, in the midst of all of this, they just said, but we want to go to God. And so they kneeled down together in a circle and they're just praying with their tears, just like, Jesus, you're worth this. And you're amazing. Thank you for the chance to be here and be suffering for you in the midst of this. And thank you for allowing us to And he said for an hour, they just prayed. And the section of the chapter is called Puddle of Tears, because after that they got up and there was just a puddle of tears where they were just declaring God's worth and value, despite the fact that they literally were threatening their lives to be there meeting in the context they were. And he said the difficulty thing was coming back to the States and going to where his new church was going to be in Alabama, and they had a really nice service, really comfortable, place, theater lights and nice seating and nice cars coming to the place, and a nice, they had an inflatable outside for the kids to do fun stuff. And he said there's nothing wrong with all of that, and it's not, we shouldn't feel guilty for that necessarily, but he just said the difference was they were there, and there was a great treasure that they felt within their souls because they were willing to sacrifice anything. They were forced to in some respects to stand there. And then there was a safe place where you're really not required to sacrifice almost anything. And he just felt this tension of what does that mean then? How does that look then? Is there something that would hinder us here because of all the comforts of those kind of things that we have from being willing to isolate ourselves from the question, does God take our everything? Because when we're willing to sacrifice huge chunks of our lives for Jesus, that would only happen because we truly treasure Jesus as the most important part of our life. And really, when you look at some of these stories from around the world, it seems to be more in line with what Jesus said when he actually spoke in the Gospels, when he actually talks to his disciples. In your notes there, I just want to run through a couple of the times that Jesus talks about sacrifice and what it would mean to follow after him. In Luke chapter 9, for instance, it says that following Jesus may require homelessness and not fulfilling people's expectations of you or leaving behind important relationships. 3 different men walk up to Jesus. One of them says, I'll follow you wherever you go. And Jesus basically looks at him and says, by the way, if you follow me, you might not have a home to go to. Are you okay with that? Second guy comes up and Jesus says, follow me. And the guy says, well, I will, but I want to go back and take care of my responsibilities to bury my father. And Jesus says, no, let the dead bury their own dead. You need to follow after me. The third guy comes and says, I'll follow you, but let me say goodbye to my family. And Jesus says, if you keep looking back and you keep wanting to go back to that, you got to follow after me. You have to leave that behind. Luke chapter 14 says, following Jesus requires an unflinching love for God that even outweighs your love for your family. It means dying to yourself. It means being willing to give up everything you have. Verses 26 and 27 of Luke 14, it says, you might have to hate your father, your mother, your wife, your children, your brothers, your sister, yes, even your own life. If that person can't do that, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. In verse 33, it says, in the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Mark chapter 10, following Jesus may require you to sell everything you have and give it to the poor. A man comes up to Jesus, and he's a guy that's done everything right. He's followed all the rules. He's followed all the customs. He's done everything he possibly could, but he was really wealthy. And he depended on his money, and he loved his money. And Jesus looks at him and just says, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. And the man walked away sad, unwilling to follow Jesus. Matthew chapter 4, following Jesus may require you to abandon your career, your hopes, your dreams, your safety. Matthew chapter 4, he calls the disciples, and the disciples leave back by everything they know, their source of income, everything they've ever dreamed about, left behind to follow after Jesus. Now, man, these are hard for us to hear, right? And for most of us, we want to instantly start to rationalize these away and the severity of the calls that Jesus did. Jesus couldn't possibly have meant what he said there. He could not have possibly have meant this. He must have meant this, but why are we so quick to change what he said to fit our own ideas? And as his representatives on earth, we turn into used car salesmen when we share him with others because we're afraid it might push people away. Which I understand, but we start to act like, hey, don't worry, follow Jesus. For 3 easy payments of $19.99, you can follow Jesus. Or, hey, lease, you don't have to buy yet. Just take it easy. You can just get in the car for a little bit and see if you like it. And a complete money-back guarantee. Hey, if you get into this and it's not exactly for you, if you want to change it, that's totally fine. We start to talk like that because we're afraid that we read this stuff and we're like, is this really what it means? Like, we really do have to sacrifice that much. David Platt says this, Jesus apparently wasn't interested in marketing himself to the masses. His invitation to potential followers were clearly more costly than the crowds were ready to accept, and he seemed to be okay with that. He focused instead on the few who believed him when he said radical things. And through their radical obedience to him, he turned the course of history in a new direction. He seemed to not be too worried about marketing himself to the masses. Think about how different that is from the world we live in today. And just an important side note, some people might hear that quote, and because of the culture of grace and comfort and ease in the world today, you might hear that as saying that Jesus doesn't care for the masses, that he only cared for a select group of radical followers. But this could not be further from the truth. And I want to explain this because I think it's one of the biggest lies in the world today. One of the biggest lies that we hold onto in our age is that by holding a standard and calling for deep commitment and responsibility, that is unloving and uncaring for people. Think today of parenting, of political issues, of morality, that in today's world, the people that hold a moral standard or a disciplined standard are mocked today for being ignorant, for being hard-headed, for being unloving and not caring about people. Where people who do not hold to a standard and make things as easy as possible, want to open it up, oh, don't worry, it's not going to cost you too much. They're seen as the loving ones, the people that truly love people because they're not going to hold a standard that somebody doesn't want to live by. But you see, all that does is make us increasingly more hypocritical and gives increasingly less meaning to our lives. C.S. Lewis says it this way: we make men without chests, and we expect of them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and bid the geldings be fruitful. What he's saying basically is that we say, yes, no, you're here, yeah, and we want to have honor, we want to have valor, we want to have all those things, but don't worry, we're not going to make you pay the cost over here. We want to make that as easy as possible. We just want to make sure that there's no level of what we have to live up to, a level of responsibility, a level of morality. There's nothing that's going to have a standard that's high. We're not going to worry about that, but we're still going to expect you to have all the things that would come from that. And he says that's not how it works. At that point, we make men and women without chest, without courage, without deepness to what they say, because we're saying that they don't have to live up to the standard of what they actually call themselves. But the complete opposite is true. The only loving, honest, and truthful thing that you and I can do for everyone is to be a radical follower of Jesus and share the true cost of following Jesus. Think about this. Only true radical Christians can be used by God to make true radical Christians. Our mission statement as the church is to engage every person to become a passionate follower of Jesus Christ. Now, how do we make a passionate follower of Jesus Christ if we're going to do everything we can to make sure that nobody has to actually follow Jesus' word to be a passionate follower of Jesus Christ? Only true radical Christians can reproduce true radical Christians. I've thought recently so much about the example that I think is a great tie-in, because many of us in here are Bills fans, right? And Bills Mafia, within the NFL, like Bills Mafia is known to be like the best fan base or one of the best fan bases. And why? Because we're crazy. Like we jump on tables, we light ourselves on fire, we shoot ketchup and mustard at each other. Like it's crazy. It's so much fun. It's awesome. And we had an amazing year this year just to see how we kind of came together as a community and we love each other. Even teams that we're playing against, players, stuff happens, and we give them like hundreds of thousands of dollars for their awesome things that they do. We have an amazing fan base. Now, if we're trying to make more Bills fans, how are we going to do that? If we followed the example of kind of how often we talk about Jesus, we'd be like, hey, if you want to be a Bills fan, that's cool. But if you want to like the Patriots, that's okay too. I'm not trying to step on your toes. Like, hey, you don't have to watch the games. You don't have to really, but we'd really like you to be, but you don't have to be, right? No, we're just like crazy Bills fans, and we just love the Bills. And by that, more people see that, and they're like, oh, I want to be a Bills fan. That's awesome. Why shouldn't I be a Bills? I'm going to jump onto that. Sure, come on. We might not make you jump on a table the first time you're a Bills fan, but hey, at some point down the road, right? But think about that with our faith. Why is it that in something so insignificant as football, that we're okay to understand that we should just be who we say we are, just be radically a Bills fan, and out of that comes more Bills fans. But then we look at our faith and we say, yeah, but not here. Like, no. I mean, yeah, Jesus said we should be radical in our faith and live truly to what it is and leave everything behind to follow him, and he'll give us everything we've always dreamed of, but I'm not going to put that out there, right? And you might say, but I get it, but how do I make the case to someone that they should sacrifice so much to follow Jesus when I even struggle to come to terms with it? Like, how does this giant sacrifice of putting everything on the line make sense? Does God just want me to suffer? Like, does he want me to just live life and feel like kind of down in the dumps about everything? Because I think a lot of us feel that way. A lot of us feel like, yeah, I'm trying to be a good Christian. I'm trying to do what I got to do. I'm trying to live life and be nice to people or whatever. But man, it doesn't look like what the Bible said. I didn't come out the other side. I don't feel amazing about life. Like, I feel like I'm just kind of going at it every day and fighting hard. And I mean, is that what God wants? He wants me to suffer the rest of my life? And here's the thing. Jesus did not say to sacrifice so much just because. He didn't say sacrifice so much because I want you to have a bad life. There was always a reason to it. You know, in Mark chapter 10, for instance, he looks at the guy and he says, sell everything you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Jesus didn't say just sacrifice everything and give up everything and follow after me. No, he said, hey, by the way, there's a treasure on the other side. Yeah, the cost is high. The cost is really high. But the treasure on the other side, man, if you only knew what that looked like. So why do we still struggle sometimes? Why do we hesitate to be radical in our love for Jesus? I just want us to sit into this and just figure out where we're at as we kind of close here. Just which seat are we in right now? Because one of the first reasons I think we hesitate to be radical in our love for Jesus is that we do not understand why Jesus is our treasure. I think for some of us here today, we just don't understand why Jesus is or should be our treasure. In the book, David Platt says, this is the picture of Jesus in the gospel. He is someone worth losing everything for. And if we walk away from Jesus of the gospel, we walk away from eternal riches. The cost of non-discipleship is profoundly greater for us than the cost of discipleship. For when we abandon the trinkets of this world and respond to the radical invitation of Jesus, we discover the infinite treasure of knowing and experiencing him. Why is he worth losing everything for? It's because of the infinite treasure of knowing and experiencing the God of the universe. Knowing and experiencing, living life with the God of the universe. I think I've told stories about it before, but years ago, we were looking for a second car that we could just buy outright, that I could basically just take from home to work to home to work to home to work. And just, we weren't going to take it on any trips. It didn't have to be anything special. It kind of looked like that, I was thinking that used car that we looked at earlier, right? Like that was my idea of what I was looking for because it didn't need to be anything special. And so we had some friends, a friend that was helping us look for some things, and he happened to have, his dad had a car that they'd worked on, and they were car people, and like amazing stuff they'd done to this, like just put racing stuff onto it, new exhaust system, all this amazing stuff, put a sound system in it that like could blow the windows out, like just really amazing stuff. The car looked awesome. It was a yellow Lexus, an old Lexus from the early 2000s, but it was this yellow Lexus. And so he was telling me about this, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I can't afford that because we're looking for like this beater, right? And he's like, the way it worked out, they just blessed us to give him the same cost that we were looking for this other car. So here I am, and I've got this really awesome looking, really decked out, like racing car, basically, that I took from home to work to home to work to home. And sometimes I would stop at a gas station, and a guy would come up to me and be like, dude, that car is awesome. And I'd be like, thanks. I don't know much about cars. Like, let's go. He's like, oh, that's this year, right? And that's that color. And it's like, and they would talk to me. And as I was talking to them, I was like, I didn't realize this car was so rare and so like sought after in like the collector realm or whatever, right? And then it's decked out with racing stuff. Basically, this car was made to be on racetracks or in a collector's collection. And here I am, I'm running it from home to work to home to work to home. And that's the reason I had this car. And I wonder sometimes if that's what we've done with following Jesus. That for you, following Jesus is not an adventure. It's not this amazing thing. And the reason is because you're not really living in that relationship. You're not understanding what you have. For some of you here today, you might not have even started a relationship with Jesus, and we would love to help you take that step today, whether it's online or in person. We want to help you take that step. But if you have, You're still not feeling like this is like what it's supposed to be. And maybe that's you haven't stepped into like, no, you've got a race car. Like, and you have to consider the fact like this is worth treasuring. Like this is everything. That Jesus wants to do everything. And sometimes I was talking to somebody recently and they brought up like atheism, or my friends talking about atheism or this, different worldviews. And it's like, but doesn't that feel more solid? And I said, what we got to get across here today is that every belief system, no matter what it is a faith system. Some people could say like, I'm an atheist because I believe in science. Well, science can't do that. Science is an observational tool, right? So every system of belief, even atheism, you weren't there at the very beginning of the universe. Like you have no idea, you weren't there to see it. In every belief system, there's an aspect of faith. I believe that this explains the world. So the question is the cost-benefit analysis of some of those world systems. For instance, we were comparing one day with somebody I was talking to that world system, the difference between Christianity and atheism. So, well, in atheism, you're kind of free of moral restraints. You can kind of do whatever you want to do. There's like nobody talking there. You can kind of make your own destiny. But the reality is, if there's no God, there's no meaning and purpose to your life. You weren't created for a reason. You kind of evolved out of sludge, and that's it. And when you die, that's it. And when you think about Christianity, the reality of the treasure of what we have is that, yes, we have to sacrifice much more in the sense of kind of stepping into. Jesus requires us to kind of offer up our whole lives. And that might mean changing some of the ways our lives looks. But when we're willing to step into that, Jesus offers us true meaning and purpose. He created us, so he designed us, so he knows exactly how we're supposed to work. He created the world the way it is so that miracles can happen. And you can start to see answers to prayer. And we step into this and you realize, oh my goodness, like this is what I'm in right now. So maybe for you today, it just needs to cross from the head that this isn't just like religious, intellectual belief. When you truly settle into like, oh my goodness, Jesus is the treasure that I've always been looking for, then you're willing to sacrifice whatever it takes. For some of us, maybe you do know that Jesus is your treasure, but you're also treasuring something else as well. You're also treasuring something else as well. My wife and I, our whole marriage, I constantly am that annoying husband that's bringing up some sound advice. maybe it's not sound, I don't know. But I'm always talking about how you can't have your cake and eat it too. And there's so many times that she struggles with that, or I struggle with it too. I think we all do, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. And legitimately in our home, sometimes we want to eat healthy. We have our own gardens to grow our own food and stuff. But she and I too, we also love cookies, right? And so we found gluten-free Oreos. And so there's like this, we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to eat healthy and do this over here, right? And that's a silly example, but there's all kinds of ways that we want to have this and we want to have that. You might want to sacrifice for others, but you also want to make sure to keep enough life for yourself. You may want to stand strong on what you believe about Jesus, but you also don't want to look weird in front of people around you. You want to give your time to Jesus, but you also want to protect enough time for yourself. And in some ways, these comparisons make sense if we just consider our faith as a series of beliefs. Like consider, we've talked about Pokemon cards, we've talked about cars, valuable. You could buy, if you had enough money, buy both of those, and you could appreciate both of them in your house. Because they're just objects. And the same thing, if you treat this relationship with Jesus just like it's some good thoughts to have and some nice actions that you do, you're never going to find satisfaction. That's not what this whole thing's about, because Jesus said that this wasn't about just like a believe these things and do these things and you'll somehow earn your way to heaven. He said, no, give up everything so that you could be in relationship with me and I will live in you to do the work. So this isn't just about beliefs, it's about relationship. Well, if that's the case, you can't treasure two different things in a relationship. For instance, you could treasure a Pokemon card and a car and treasure them both. But you can't treasure a wife and a mistress and be considered to have a healthy marriage. You can't say you treasure your child and then spend every waking moment at work and never see them. See, when relationship comes into the mix, you can't do both. The Bible talks about it like this in Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. And in this case, Jesus says you can't serve both God and money. But it's applicable across the board. We can't have our cake and eat it too. And for some of us right now, the reason that this feels so burdensome to us is because we're trying to treasure Jesus and treasure something else. And that's not how it works. The third way that this happens in our lives, and it's hard for us to become radical and see and live truly what we're meant to, is because we rationalize Jesus' words in order to make our relationship with him more manageable. One point early here in the book, he says this, but talking about sacrificing everything and how Jesus talks about that, he says, but we don't want to believe it. We're afraid of what it might mean for our lives. So we rationalize these passages away. Jesus wouldn't really tell us to not bury our father or say goodbye to our family. Jesus didn't literally mean to sell all we have and give it to the poor. What Jesus really meant was, and this is where we need to pause, because we're starting to redefine Christianity. We're giving into the dangerous temptation to take the Jesus of the Bible and twist him into the version of Jesus we're more comfortable with. A nice, middle-class American Jesus, a Jesus who doesn't mind materialism, and it would never call us to give away everything we have. A Jesus who would not expect us to forsake our closest relationships so that he receives all of our affection. A Jesus who's fine with nominal devotion, that does not infringe on our comforts, because after all, he loves us just the way we are, and so on and so forth. And he says this, but you and I realize what we're doing at this point. We're molding Jesus into our image. He's beginning to look a lot like us, because after all, that's whom we were most comfortable with. And the danger now is that when we gather in our church buildings to sing and lift our hands in worship, we may not actually be worshiping the Jesus of the Bible. Instead, we may be worshiping ourselves. Some tough words. I get it. I mean, we hear those things from Jesus, and there's instantly, in some of us, just like this, no, I got to hold on to some of this. But again, I go back to the question. The only reason we feel that is because at the end of the day, we don't see why Jesus is worth everything. And the danger is if we live in that too long and we start to rationalize this away, it is going to feel burdensome. It is going to feel like it's not worth it. But it's because we're rationalizing away what he actually calls us to. And in the end of the day, we could end up just worshiping ourselves. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a very good God. I don't want to worship myself. Because there's only one God that created me, and I want to worship him. The end result, whether it's because we don't see God as Jesus as a treasure, or we're treasuring him, but we're also treasuring something else, or we rationalize Jesus' words away, the end result is that in all these cases, we miss out on the full joy of following Jesus. And I don't want us to miss out on that. I don't want to miss out on that. Even today, just wanting to hear the word for myself, I don't want to miss out on that. I listened to a sermon by David Platt last night just talking about how there's still, right now in this world, 3 billion people that are unreached people that have never heard the name of Jesus in the world today. That puts things in perspective, doesn't it? I want to do that. I've been around the world. I've been a pastor's kid. I've been in the church my whole life. I met a lot of people. I met people that were seeking for God. I met people that were nice people, but they were just trying to do this on their own strength. I've met very torn people, like people that are very hypocritical, trying to live a double life. Met all kinds of people. But I've been very blessed, and I don't take this lightly, I've been very blessed to have also met several real, raw, radical believers in Jesus. People that when you get around them, you're like, oh my goodness, like this person, like they know Jesus. And it's one of the reasons that I still believe in Jesus. There was a time in my life where I kind of was like, I don't know, is this true? Should I follow this? Is this really the path I think I should take? And part of what God used in that time in my life was me to see real, true Christians living out a real historical faith, saying like this actually works, like this can happen. What's crazy though, in the world today, when you say, a radical Christian, immediately people are going to have a certain example. They're going to say angry, they're going to say rough, stodgy, narrow-minded, religious, radical religious person. In the case of all these people that I met, never once did any of them resemble that at all. What they did resemble is they had a spiritual weight to them. Like they walked into a room and you're just like, oh my goodness, like they've been with God. But you know what characterized them? Love, joy, freedom. A sense of awe for God. And a sense, again, that they had been with God. The only way that came in any of those people's lives, if you talk to any of them, the only reason that ever happened for them is because they got into the point in their life that they had found their treasure in Jesus. That they had bought that car. They had been willing to say, like, yes, that car is worth everything to me, that I'm going to sell everything I have. I'm going to give everything of who I am, and I'm going to step into that because Jesus is worth it. And by doing that, they were able to live this life. that we all yearn for, of joy and peace and freedom. So today, the worship team's going to lead us in a song here, but I just want to give some moment to just pause and just to be with Jesus and to ask him. And again, maybe you're here, whether you're online or in person, and you've never started that relationship with him. You've heard about him, you said like, yeah, it sounds like it costs a lot, but I want to step in. If you're online, go to ehwc.org/mymoment, or you can just respond in the link there. Just click the My Moment button or the response button. If you're in here, we'd love to talk to you afterwards at the hospitality room, or we'd love to give you an Engage How to Know God book, or even right now, you can start a relationship with Jesus. Just repenting from where you've been, understanding what Jesus did on the cross, that he died for your sins and my sins, but then he resurrected so that we could have life, and step into that. Or if you're here today and you are a follower of Jesus, but you either have to make some work, you're treasuring multiple things, or you're trying to rationalize away, maybe God wants to speak and call you into something today, to take a new step in your faith, to be radical, to truly be what you call yourself to be. So as we worship, let's just listen to him about that.